Okay, so here's the video. So in this video, I'm going to go all the way to the very end of the building process and start on a little bit of the unwrapping process. But today I've kind of like decided to step back a couple of steps and remake, or not remake, but make again the plug, the LED, and the plug on the monitor, as well as the coil, just like we did in class today, just so it's fresh in our mind. And I'm literally going to take this whole video to the very end of the modeling phase, including all the beveling, all the booleaning, if there's booleaning at all, to the very, very end. Cool, so this is going to be a long video, so be prepared. Cool, so yeah, let's make these two things, the plug and the LED. Now remember, when we're doing our texturing at the end, this might not be an LED in your texture, this might be a button or something, but all I'm looking at here is just a simple shape of both of these. So what are they? They're based off cylinders, so let's make a cylinder. So I'm going to make a cylinder there, but number one, before I do anything, I've got to decide how many edges round is this going to be. Is it going to be 20 edges? No, it's because 20 edges for this, it's not that big. It's not that big, so I'm going to bring that number down to 12. 12 is a nice number. It's got a nice cross section in there. It's cool. So I'm going to bring it over. I'm going to rotate around 90 degrees, so it's facing the right direction. So you can see there, rotate Z 90 degrees. And I'm going to take away the faces, which will be against the surface of my battery. So now that I've done that, I've made my cylinder. I've decided how many edges round it's going to be. Pardon, I got the burps again. And I've taken away the faces on the inside there. I'm now going to put the pivot point. I'm going to D and V and drag the pivot point to the back of here. And again, I've gone through this a million times already, but I think I really need to try and drill it home. Whenever you're doing the D and V thing, so you D to move pivot point and V to snap to vertex, if I'm just moving it backwards, I'm not going to try and, well, in this case, it's hard to kind of describe, but when you're moving anything like this, when you're moving a pivot point in a straight line backwards or in a straight line upwards or wherever, if I grab it from the middle, it's going to snap to wherever my pivot point, wherever my mouse is, which is fine. But what if you want the pivot point to be in the middle of your object, like in the center there? You've got to drag your mouse to the vertex, which is in line. Oops, which is in line with the back of that object, or in line with the top of that object, or whatever. So in this case, I want to drag it back to the very back of this object. So DV, drag it back. And it's not about moving the actual manipulator around. It's about where your mouse is. So is your mouse next to one of those vertexes? That's what it's going to snap to. Okay, anyway. So I'm going to snap it to the bottom of this, and then it's moving into place, and then just start using just scale tool. That's all I'm going to use for this mainly. It's just getting a scale tool to get the first shape in here, this kind of black rubber collar section at the bottom. So I'm going to, again, and because this is a separate object as well, I can move this around later on if I want to reposition it. Even after I've done the coil, because a lot of the movement will be very very slight and not very kind of not very dominant movement. Cool. Sorry, I'm just kind of getting distracted. So yeah, it's making this collar. So then I'm quite happy with that for now. So what I'm going to do now is just do some lots of extrusions. And the process is just going to be extrude in, extrude out, extrude in, extrude out. That's basically going to be the whole thing. So let me just select these faces. Extrude in. And I'm going to not use the offset tool for this. Now, you might think, well, why not use the offset tool? I'm just trying to keep it very simple. So I've just extruded. I hit my scale tool. I scale in. I extrude again. I hit my movement tool. I move out. I hit my extrude tool. Hit my scale tool. Move in. Hit my extrude tool. Hit my move tool. Move out. And then what I can do is literally just use the scale tool and the edge selection mode just to get these shapes into the right kind of shape. Now again, I'm looking at my reference, I'm looking at what I've got here, and I'm trying to match that as best I can. Again, I'm going to add bevels and stuff later on, but I want to try and get as close as I can. Knowing that I can't make it perfect. at this stage. This is my sketch, essentially. And I'm really paying attention to slight movement. So if it gets slightly thinner near the end, or if it gets slightly wider near the end, or something like that. So I'm really paying attention to that. I'm also stepping back every now and then and just seeing, does this look the right scale compared to this if I step back? Because if we spend all our time looking at it like this, filling the entire screen, we're going to lose a sense of scale. Again, just like 2D. You don't lean into your sketchbook when you're doing a drawing. You'll step back and you'll do the whole drawing, and then maybe lean in when you do your detailing. But even then, you don't want to really lean in. So I'm happy with that. So now when I'm happy with these general, actually no, I'm not happy with that at all. Just and then a little bit of like that. It's a little tiny bit of like that. So what I can do now is again look at my reference, and I'm going to go around and do a bunch of beveling. Not very like nothing. There's going to be one section which is going to be more than one segment, but a lot of this is just going to be a single segment because that's all you need for something so small in a single segment. So what I'm going to do is bevel these two sections right that. Bevel. And for me, looking at this, that's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. I don't need any more than that. I don't think I need to put another bevel here because, again, just looking at this, I don't see the reason for a bevel. Same for here. I don't see the reason for a bevel here. But at the very top, you can see it gets a little bit curved. So also, I do want it to look like it goes in a little bit at the end here. But I might actually leave that until I've got my coil in there so I can kind of use the coil as a tool to make it look better. So okay, but I'm gonna get this curve in there. So add a single segment in like that. Maybe bring down that fraction a bit more. Yeah, look at that, perfect. Now I want to stress that I'm not completely well. I might not necessarily be completely done with this because what if I think, oh, you know what? This section here is a little bit too high compared to this, so I can drag it back. But now I've done that, is this a little bit too high, this, so I can drag that back. And notice how, if I'm just dragging, like, if I'm just using, like, I just need to grab, like, this top section here that I've just selected. A really quick way of me doing that is, like, looking side on, and then just grabbing the vertexes that associate with that area, and moving those around forward and backwards. That's all I'm doing. Okay, cool. There you go. Boom. Now I'm going to make the LED, but I'm going to do that exact same way. In fact, it's a lot simpler. Again, make a cylinder. That. So I'll make my cylinder at the beginning because I'm making my LED here. And what I'm going to do is, first of all, decide that poly count going around that subdivision axis. And I'm going to stick with 12. Just like I did with this plug I've just made, I'm going to stick to 12. Bang. Like that. So again, same jazz. It's going to be sitting against this surface so I can get rid of those faces at the back. Like that. Put my pivot point at the very bottom, like that. Because that's going to be against the surface of the model, so you might as well anchor there. And then just move it quickly into place. Well, not quickly, but move it into place. Like that. And I'm using other bits of geometry to snap against. So what I know I want it to be directly above my plug, therefore I'm using the vertex in the middle of the plug to anchor against, to V-snap to. And then it's just a case of very simple modeling. There you go. So I've got this little base plate thing going on. Oops. There you go. Base plate thing going on. It's like them, like extrude in, then extrude up. Yeah. Now, you could argue that there is a little bit of metal across the very bottom there if you look at the reference. But I'm going to just leave it as this personally. And the only thing I'm going to do is just bevel these two bits here. With like that. That's enough for me. And I'm going to leave it like that for now because even though the scale isn't possibly perfect and position isn't possibly perfect, this is a separate bit of geometry. It's not being controlled by anything else. If I want to scale this up and down later on, I've got complete freedom to do that. Okay, cool. Right, let's move on to the little plug into the monitor. Same jazz, it's just a cylinder. But it's a slightly bigger cylinder, so in this case, I want to use a higher subdivision axis. But in this case, I still don't want to use a 20 because it's still not quite big enough to be a 20 for me. So I think a 16 is good because again, 16 will give you no, yes, 16 will give you that nice cross section. Take away the bottom face because again, it's against a surface. It's against this surface here, so we can get rid of it. Let's put the pivot point at the bottom. So then we can just basically build from this. Pardon me. And again, I'm going to use another bit of geometry which is already flush against the surface here to snap against. So just to get it generally in the right position. So I'm going to hold V. I'm going to snap it to one of these corners here because that is, again, it's flush up against this surface. So why don't I just use that to snap against? And then I can just use the arrows to move it into place, use my scale tool to scale it around. And I'm going to look at here, what's the distance between the top of the cylinder to the bottom of the switch and the bottom of the cylinder to the bottom of the monitor. So I'm kind of going to try and, you know, get my scale of this using that. So again, we're looking at things to scale relative from. So what's the distance between 2 points? Does it align with something? That kind of jazz. Pardon me again, sorry. Okay, so I'm going to get that, again, that collar at the bottom. It does look like it comes in a little bit. It doesn't look like it's a perfect straight cylinder. So I can just scale it in a little bit. It's not that much, it's just a little bit. And then in the face mode, just grab all these faces, scale in, getting that kind of that division there, and then scale out. Sorry, not scale, extrude. So extruding. Look at the distance between the edge of the collar to the edge of this green metal section, and then extrude out again to make that shape. How far does that come out roughly? Now with this, there's not really that much we can use to scale it, to kind of measure against. So we've got to use our kind of eye, maybe get our camera in a similar position to our reference, kind of eyeball that in a little bit. Now I am going to do a bit of beveling at the top just to get that roundness in there because there is a little bit of roundness there. So, but not like that, obviously, not to that level. So we've got to bring that down a little bit. I'm coughing a lot at the minute. I've been talking all day and my voice is knackered. So here I'm just going to add a single segment in there. So my segment count is 2, and that's enough for me. That's already looking really nice. And I'm going to add another bevel segment just inside there. So bevel that bit. Let's half that to 0.25, maybe 0.35. Yeah, that's nice. Cool. Now here's what I was talking about in class before. We've got this little, so this is a really nice simple shape to make. However, we've got this little cube that comes out the bottom of it. And here's where I can do a bit of experimentation, a bit of thinking. So if I just take these two faces at the bottom and extrude out and just pull it down, so I'm not using the tools it gives me, because if I do that, it's going to come out at a wrong shape. So I'm just going to extrude, go to my movement tool, drag it down. Looking at that to there and here, to me looks too thin. In my reference, it looks a little bit wider. Okay, so if it looks wider, let's step back. Let's go like 4 of these faces. So these 4. Okay, let's do the same thing. Let's extrude down, drag down like that. Okay, now it looks too wide. Okay, cool. So what if I half that? What if I take these 2 faces at the bottom and then half of each face either side of it? Well, how do I do that? Just a multi-cut. Because all I'm going to do is cut faces. So I can go in here with a multi-cut And I'm going to do this as one big shape either side. So, again, sorry, I'm losing my voice. Friday syndrome. So, what I'm going to do is just cut from here to here, like that. So this is looking underneath here, so I'm cut here to here, like that. Cool. And then when I've got those in there, I know what's happening. I can then sort out the end gun. So this is an end gun face right here, so I can go from there to there, like this. And then at the bottom, I can do the same thing, there to there. So I've got that nice little solution there. And then the other side. And then there we go. So notice how I'm building edges. I'm completing before I go to another side. So now I've got the two faces in the middle, and then I've got like two half faces either side. So then when I extrude, normal movement tool, drag that down, that's much nicer. That's a much better shape right there. It's pretty much bang on the width of what's happening here. I'm happy with that. But there's still something. So if I'm just dragging down from these four faces here, I'm going to be rubbing up against these faces underneath it straight away like that. It's not really going to do much, but that kind of irritates me a little bit. I want to give a nice bit of like realistic clearance between this little cylinder, this little cube which is getting extruded downwards, and this section here. It'll avoid any like weird texture issues later on. So the last thing I'll do, again with the multi-cut tool, is just hold control, and I'm just going to put an edge just about like there. Just enough so it gives me a little bit of clearance between what's going to be extruded and then this kind of like rubber surface here. So I can extrude that down. Use that scaling trick we were using, because obviously we're coming down and we've still got that curve there. So I can use this and just drag in from the y-axis. In this case, the y-axis, because it needs to be flattened against the y-axis. Other axes are going to be different. There we go. And then look at that and see how far down does this come. Is there anything where we can look at the bottom of this and align it to it? It looks like it comes just below this black collar. So, like that. Awesome. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to extrude in just the insides. Actually, before I do that, I'm just going to clean up a bit of the geometry, because we've got these two edges coming round like this. And I kind of want to do a bit of optimization while I'm here. So I'm just going to use target weld and drag this into that corner, this into that corner, this into that corner, this into that corner, like that. It just makes beveling, extruding, that kind of thing in this area a lot easier. It's not really doing anything. I'm only doing it in these corners at the bottom as well. I am not doing it up here or at the back. I'm just doing it in these corners. So then I can just grab them, use the extrusion, use the offset. Because this time I'm actually using the proper tools. And then extrude up. Inside a little bit, just to give us a bit of a recess to push the cable in later on. And then what I'm going to do is just go around and do a bit of beveling. So I'm going to grab all these edges, going around, grab these ones, then grab these ones around here. Oops. So I've got the ones at the base of the kind of cylindrical plug section. I've got the vertical corners. And then I've got the edges going round the bottom of this on the outside and the inside. See if I now bevel that. Perfect. I probably bring it down a little bit. Maybe make it a bit smaller like that. Perfect. There we go. Absolutely perfect. And all I'm doing there is, again, just mimicking this bevel highlight we got right there. Perfect. I mean, I'm coughing a lot, sorry. Cool. And there, I can still look at this and go, okay, have I made it a bit too small? You know, like, is the distance between the top of it to the top to the bottom of the plug, is that too big on mine? do I need to make it bigger so I can just, again, to make it a bit bigger? Everything's still workable. Do you need to push it out a little bit more? Everything's still absolutely workable because it's nice and basic geometry. Cool. So I'm going to do a save there, incremental save. And my next thing now is to get those coils in there. So, we did the curves in the class, and I've done the curve stuff in the video, so I'm not going to re-explain curves again, but just using an EP curve, I'm going to put down 4 points first. Again, keeping the curve nice and basic first for the first stage, and then adding the geometry, the detail later on. So, I'm going to take the end point here, I'm going to snap that to the middle of my plug there, because that's the end point for that part of the curve. And then I'm going to take the beginning part of the curve and bring it to... So first of all, I'm going to snap it to a vertex near where I want it to go, because it just gets it to the destination quicker. And then from there, I'm going to move it down, then move it in, like that. Just so it's in generally the right area. And then the vertex that are left, all I need to do is move those into place. To get, again, it doesn't need to be perfect, I just need a general shape. Like that. Nope, not like that at all. Something like that, I guess. So, super simple to get that shape in there. I'm not over worrying about anything. I'm just trying to get the basic shape in there. So now that I've done that, I'm going to rebuild the curve to add a few more divisions through there, so I can just modify the curve a little bit further. Because currently, with these 4 points, or the amount of points I've gotten through it, I can do it a little bit, but I've not got as much controllability as I'd want to, especially for the later stages. It gets a little bit crusty in some areas. So what I'm going to do is select my curve in object mode, curves at the very top, down to rebuild option box, and then just make sure I got 8 spans in there. 6 or 8 are perfect. Any more than 8, it's overboard. Any fewer than 6, you're too few. So between 6 or 8, it's up to you. I'm going to add 8. So you can see that the curve is slightly softened, and I've got a few more points down the curve. If I need to alter it in a bit, I can do that. Cool. So now my curve's in there, I can get my helix. So create polygon primitives, helix. Just going to hold shift and drag that out and complete that tool. So remember, I don't need to worry about what's going on in my channel box creation section just yet, because all that is being done later on. So now that I've done that, grab my curve, grab my geometry, or grab my helix in this case, deform, curve warp. It's going to snap to the beginning of the curve, so in my case it's the monitor plug. And then if I just click on my geometry and then go to my channel box and then go to my helix, polyhelix thing here, and then when I start to adjust the height, you'll obviously see that we start to warp against this and start to conform. I get my width in there. So now it's a time for me to actually start messing with these settings to get the right effect. Again, looking at my reference. And if you've got something like the coils here goes up to 20 by like standard kind of numerical values. If you want to go higher, you've got to manually add those numbers in. So if I go to 30, okay, 30 is all right. Oops, it is. There you go. 30 is all right. My width is looking decent. Maybe I can add I got a bit more coils. My radius is at 0.4. What might look like? Yeah, 0.4 for me is quite nice. My subdivision axis being as 8 is grand, because that's basically your subdivision axis is the amount of edges going round each edge like that. So 8's perfectly fine. Your subdivision coil is important because essentially from one full rotation of a coil, 50 edges are in there. So if I have 50 edges in there and I've got a long coil, I've got thousands and thousands of faces. So what I want to do is bring that down, and I think a good number is something like 12. It might look really low res, but remember that when we apply materials to this and stuff, it's gonna all this kind of low poly information is gonna be hidden. And again, if you look at the reference, you can kind of see how low poly this is. So now with that there, I can just grab the curve again, go to Control Vertex. Oops, daisy. Bring it on, and I just kind of arrange the curve. Because again, this curve is being controlled by the no, sorry, the geometry is being controlled by the curve. And I'm just looking at this. I think my coil's a little bit too thin. Yeah, like that. Okay, my width is 3.5. Looks all right. Cool. And again, I can spend a bit of time just messing with that curve to adjust my wire. I can really spend a long time doing this. Cool. Now, while I'm doing this as well, I can look at the very end here. Now, where it comes into the battery here, this is really easy for me to sort out. I don't know why in the first video I made it a lot harder than it really needed to, but with this, I'm just looking at how this coils around, and essentially, it pretty much ends up where I want it to. So if I just kind of do something like this, the whole thing ends up perfect. Because I can basically force the end of this coil, then this helix to go into the center of that. Like that. Perfect. And all I'm doing there is just moving the end control points of the curve. Bang. Perfect. Now the weird one is up here. This is where we're actually going to have to do a bit of modeling. Where our curve needs to, if we look at that reference, wraps up into the plug, I guess. Now it's not as easy for us to do what we did over here and just move some stuff. It's not as easy. So in this case, what I'm going to do is say I am done with my geometry. Or I'm done with my curve. My curve is done. Its time has been done. I'm good. So after I do this, I can't use a curve anymore. So edit. Make sure you save as well. So make sure you do a nice incremental save. So if you do want to come back and reuse the curve in this state, you can still come back. So I've just done a save then. So I'm just going to select my geometry, edit, delete all by type history, and now the curve is a completely separate object. So I've literally just selected it there and deleted it. Now my curve is no more, and the geometry of my my coil, my wire is just a piece of geometry now. So what I'm going to do is delete a portion of this geometry until I can basically get to a point where I can extrude it back. When you see what I mean. So I'm going to just, again, I'm looking to see where the best point to delete would be, so that I can then basically just extrude back up into this cavity as like a straight line of a curve being kind of dragged up. If you see like phone wire and phone coil wire being like pushed into the receiver handle or something. So like that. And then I'm just going to extrude this up, rotate around so it's nice and flat. And this is, again, this is one of the weirder things you do in 3D for like head scratchy, why do you do that kind of stuff. Because I'm going to do this, I've got the beginning of my curve right here, and I've got the end of my curve right here, or the beginning of my geometry, and the end of my geometry. But if I add a single edge in this middle section here, using the Mesh Tools Connect, I can basically start to form that coil again, or form that geometry again. Just using rotate and scale just to try and get that round shape back in. Again, add a couple of edges either side. And then using the rotate and then one more in each kind of segment, just to again just to get that curve back in there. Because all I'm doing here is just trying to trick the eye into thinking that the coil's being dragged into this underside. Like that, essentially. And you can massage that for a while and make it look really, really pretty and stuff, but a lot of what can be communicated is simple geometry. And again, the texture is gonna help us a lot for that. Boom. Coil done. And again, look back at the other video, the dedicated coil video for a few of the tips and tricks I did to do with this. Now, the last thing I'm going to do now, before I start looking at the spout at the end and actually UV in this thing, is the battery section. So the battery section, it's a symmetrical object, left to right. So what I'm going to do is just work on one half of it. So I'm going to go to edge mode and just select all the center edges running around the middle. Mesh tools connect. Delete in face mode one half of it. And then I'm going to isolate this off. So I'm going to object mode and isolate this. And then quite simply, first of all, I'm just going to add the bevel going up the side of this. So make sure I'm working on the front section, which I am. So adding a bevel across this top section here. I think I found that 0.25 worked for me, which it does. And then we've also got a bevel at the back here. But it's not quite as big, so I'm going to do another bevel back here, but at a much smaller number. So in this case, maybe 0.15. Nice. That bevel's giving me that front bevel section there, and that back bevel's giving me this bevel section there at the back. And I'm looking at the very top of this section, seeing that is actually quite a sharp little angle there. Okay. Next, what I'm going to do is just add a couple of edges in, going round, to denote this top edge going around there and this bottom edge going around there. So, again, just using the multi-cut tool. So about there and about there. Again, because we're working on very, very simple geometry, doesn't matter if I'm getting these nailed on perfect either time. Because I can just grab stuff and move it up and down as I like. And then even later on, I can adjust stuff super, super easy. Which is good. And just before I leave these, I'm just going to bevel each one of these edges individually to get the thickness. Because if we look at the reference here, this is a little bit of an indentation running around, but the top one is thinner than the bottom one. So grabbing that top edge, beveling it, and bringing that number right down. So my top bevel, I ended up being something like a 0.025, and then my bottom one here ended up being something along the lines of 0.4. So 0.04, sorry, not 0.4, 0.04. So very, very small bevels. And again, if I find that these are actually too big later on or too small, I can just easily adjust them with the scale tool. It's very, very adaptable and easy. So while I'm dealing with the main body here, what I'm going to do is add that little bit of thickness to this bottom section where this past sticker is and stuff. Just by, again, very, very simple stuff. I'm just going to grab all the faces around the outside, at the bottom here, not including the bottom here, just this section right there. Extrude. And again, I'm going to nudge this out very, very tiny, like. So in my case, 0.2. Like I said, very, very small amount. Because when we extrude these sections in here, it's going to add a little bit more to this anyway. Oh, this has seemed to be put out of shape. So let's pull this back in. Yeah, cool. Now one thing, now that we've done those extrusions, or that extrusion of this section, we will have to go into the inside section and just look for these thin little faces in the inside there. Get rid of them, because we do not want these internal faces. They will ruin our day. So far, so good. So I'm going to move up to the top here, and I'm just going to start making my little raised section here. So again, this is a simple little multi-cut jobby, so I'm going to get my multi-cut. Just going to pull, so I'm going to extreme this angle at first, but just to kind of show what I'm going to do later on. I'm going to come from the front to the back in a straight line like that. And then this new edge here, I'm going to grab it, and just to make sure it's nice and straight, I'm going to use that scale trick just to bring it to the middle, like that. And then I'm going to pay attention to what I've got here, my reference, and this surface here is essentially this surface right here. So what I've got to do is move this and get the same kind of distance from where it's a flat edge here and it raises up to it's a flat edge here because we're going to raise it up in a sec. So I'm going to try and eyeball that in. Something like that. And then I can grab that face right there and literally just extrude up. Again, looking at how high this raises away from this surface. And then grabbing this top edge here. And then just pushing that back to get that angle in there. Very cool. And again, because this is really basic geometry, it's really easy to change stuff anyway later on. So if I find that this is too far away from the edge, I need to bring it further back, I can literally just grab this face and then just move this whole thing forward and back. Or if I think that this is too shallow and my angle here needs to be steeper, I can just scale it to introduce more of a curve to that, or go the opposite way if I want to flatten it off a bit more. Very, very adaptable, very, very simple and easy stuff, geometry-wise. So while I'm here, I'm also going to fix up some of the n-gons that I've got happening, because I've got an n-gon at the top here. Because if we look, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 edges. And then down here at the front, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 edges. And at the back, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 edges. Now these are all very, very simple fixes. Again, it's just a multi-cut jobby. So in this top face here, I'm just going to cut it in half. So from this edge here, all the way to the back there. That fixes that one up. And then right here, I'm just going to come from this edge here, all the way down to there. Front and back. So do the same thing back here. Perfect. Now what I'm going to do is do a bit of beveling while I'm in here now. Do a little bit of beveling. And I'm not going to go overboard with this. I'm going to look for the main stuff. So for me, the main stuff is like this edge going up here. Because I'm looking here and I'm thinking, well, yeah, you can see where you got this highlight going around the middle, down the middle here. That's an obvious indication of a bevel. So I've got both of those. I'll have the same here. Notice I deselected this. I don't want to bevel this edge, so I deselected it. And at the very, very bottom as well, you'll have this small face running around. I want to have these. I do actually want to have these beveled. I want to take my bevel all the way to the bottom, at the bottom. But at the top, I don't want to have this edge included. Okay, so I can bevel that. Or I might do front and back kind of separate. So let me do the front on its own first. Okay, so just the front bevel. Now again, I'm not looking to make this curved. I'm looking to just indicate a shape. So I'm going to bring this down. A segment. Maybe make it a bit tighter. So I'm looking at like 0.25 around there for that. And then around the back, because I'm looking at this top angle here, I'm seeing this as a sharper edge. I am still going to bevel these the same way. So again, grabbing that all the way to the bottom. I do not want this top edge grabbed when I do this. So if you end up selecting that, make sure you deselect it. Bevel. And again, same thing, bring that nice and tight. So for me, 0.15 with no subdivision axis. So no segments. Sorry, not subdivision axis, no segments. So that's good for now. And just to kind of help stuff up, I'm just going to grab this center edge here, because now that I've beveled, I've started creating a few n-gons, which again is fine. I'm just going to bring these closer. I want to expose these triangles a little bit before I do the next bit. So now, I know in class I might have done things kind of in a different order, but I'm still going to have the same information. So I've got these thin faces going wrapping around here and here, the bottom. So all I'm going to do is just extrude, and again, move those in slightly, not a lot. So in my case, 0.1 is a perfect amount. I don't need to bring them in that far. Because all I'm trying to do, you can see in the reference, I'm just trying to suggest like geometric information there. I don't need it like super crazy brought in. Cool. So now I'm going to go back to the beveling. So grab that edge, and that edge. So just these three. So that top one there, this one here, and then this one here. Not the inside ones, just the outside ones. I'm going to bevel these. A small ratio, because again, look at how sharp that bevel is on the reference. It's nice and sharp. And then I'm going to do this outside one at the very bottom here. A little bit bigger, because you can see there, we've got a bigger bevel there. I'm going to add one segment, just to this one section there. Adding one segment. And in fact, I don't need to do that. I'm going to leave it as a single segment. So for me, that's perfect. In my case, the only thing I'm going to do around here is just look, and I've got this center edge here. Let's have a look side on. You'll see I've got this center edge, which isn't doing anything. So I'm going to take that away. And I'm also going to take away these edges that came from the extrusion I've just done. And it'll be the same over here as well at the back. Because we do not want these faces there. Like that. So any n-gons have now been fixed, any kind of rogue little face on the inside of stuff have been fixed. Nice. The last little bevel I'm going to do is around the top. I'm just going to select around the top here, making sure I've got all the edges. And I remember saying in class that make sure when you do these bevels, before you kind of move on, just make sure you've got everything selected, because you can say, okay, I've got everything selected, bevel, and then you'll find stuff like this, where you've obviously had an edge which hasn't been selected when you do your bevel. So make sure you get everything. And again, same thing, just looking at that bevel, seeing how much information I really need to put into there. So for me, that's even just a standard bevel at this point is looking perfect. I don't need any more than that. Yeah, just really basic stuff. So again, this might be slightly up to what I did in class, but just adaptability, move with the flow of what's happening. You might do something one step before or two steps before that ends up you having a slightly different effect. But as long as you get something that's as simple and as readable as this, you're good. Nice and readable. The bevels are just there to introduce a little bit of curve to the surfaces. I'm not over beveling anything, which I think is a problem with a lot of people. You're over beveling stuff, adding too many segments into stuff. So now in this case, I've just got to fix up these end guns. So I've got that edge that I had going across the middle before, because I beveled up these edges. It's given me these big triangles, and the corners here on both sides, like these internal edges, have given me like a big old end gun right there. So this whole face is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This is a 9-side end gun, which obviously isn't great. And the one inside here is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's a 6-sided shape inside here. Right. So again, there's no hard and fast rule on how to fix this. There's no kind of like hammer for every nail kind of thing. You've just got to look at what you're doing and try and find the quads. Which again, this is why I'm always going on about doing puzzles and stuff. So I'm looking at this and thinking, okay, where can I find? I'm looking at this this area specifically that I've just selected. Where can I find those quads? Or where can I find those solutions? Okay. Well, I've got a vertex right here. So what if I build an edge from this vertex there into the corner? Okay, that's kind of solved something. It's tightened up the shape a little bit more. That's cool. So then I've got 1, 2, 3 edges here. Okay, what's going on the other side? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So okay, so I'm still dealing with an extra edge somewhere. Okay, so how do I do that? I could bring an edge from this vertex into that corner. Though it's not particularly amazingly pretty, it's going to be okay. It's going to be good enough. I'm going to show you a different way, like another way I could solve that in a second. It's adding like an extra edge in, but it's not bad. Now, then we've got these points here, so we've got these corner vertexes that we made before. So a 3 at the front here because it's a larger end gun, for me anyway, because it's a larger surface, and these 2's back here because it's a smaller surface. Now for this, it's again just a multi-cut job into these vertexes. Just like that. Boom, just like that, boom, fixed. Again, same on I've got these 3 vertex, and I'm just going to bring triangles into here. Just like that. Because there, you've got all the fixes have been done. There's no end guns. There's a few triangles. Now, the reason I was talking about I'm going to show you how to do it a different way is because this particular triangle here, this edge, it's making a really stretched triangle over a large area. It's making this polygon kind of a very funny shape, which I'm not a mad fan of. So what I can do there instead is if I just delete that edge, so control backspace, what I'm going to do instead is build an edge like this, across like that. Now sometimes when you're building complex geometry, you've got to add edges in across like this. But yes, that edge isn't doing anything to the geometry. It's not doing any kind of like silhouette change. But what's happening is it's just giving you a bit of a neater surface. So instead of having a triangle in this corner, I've now got a quad here, a quad here, quad here. Yes, I've still got a few triangles, but I'm taking down the amount of triangles. So a little bit of like intermediate advanced theoretical kind of modeling. Why would you take an edge into somewhere else? But you know, that's why. Now from there, I've just got to sort out the bottom. So luckily, I've got this edge that came from this extrusion I did just to make this whole bottom section a bit wider. So I can actually, I don't even need to bevel this section because I can literally grab that outside edge and lift it up slightly, and then that gives me a bevel. Essentially, it kind of gives me the impression of a bevel. So I'm going to do similar stuff down here because again, I fixed up this end gun earlier in class. I fixed it up very very early on. In here, I'm just coming back to it late. I'm just coming back to it later on. So again, it's not a problem. Simple stuff. Because what I'm going to do here is just take an edge from the other side, from one side to the other, like that. I'm kind of going to mimic what I've done at the top here a little bit. And I'm going to bring an edge from here down to the middle, like that. And then from this edge over to the middle, like that. So then I've got quads appearing. I've got these big quads, which are very nice. And I've just got these problem areas here, because I've got end guns in this corner, So then all I have to do is multi-cut, like this. Into them corners. Now this is out of the way, so you're not going to see much of any kind of oops, what is this? Any kind of like weird, disgusting geometry. You're not there. No, though there shouldn't be any there. You're not really going to see anything that might go wrong. So that's just solving that issue of what's happening at the bottom there. Again, that's like intermediate kind of modeling. So just take your time, pause the video, or make the video run slower, and follow what I do on that one. Cool. So the only thing I need to do now is just make sure I look at the back of the monitor, or the back of the battery, and you can see that it's clipping through because that's clipping through because I did the extrusion before to make it thicker. So all I'm going to do is push that back a little bit, again, just to kind of give myself a bit of space. And the only other thing is where my LED and my plug are, again, because I added that tiny bit of thickness to it, they've now been pushed into the surface, so I've just got to make sure I move these out and snap those to the surface like this. Now you could also do the battery before you do the coil section. You know, I just chose to do the battery after I did the plugs and LED and coil, so you know, whatever order is fine as long as you get there. And now I'm just going to grab this, make sure that my pivot point is in the middle. So just make sure I D and V and just drag it and then move my mouse to one of the vertexes in the middle. And then all I've got to do is make sure that my scale is set to 1. I shouldn't have any numbers inside here. If I do have any kind of weird numbers inside here, I just got to click the little snowflake there. That's going to freeze my transformations, which means everything basically gets reset. Control D, duplicate. Hold J for Juliet, and then drag into the middle, and it'll flip over like that. When you drag it far enough, it'll flip over. And if yours turns black, dead simple, it just means that all the faces have been flipped inwards. Just go to mesh display. Just go to reverse. Hey, it's fixed. And then just make sure you grab both of those on their own, combine, and merge. There you go. Now this is still subject to change. If I think this needs to be a tiny bit fatter or a tiny bit thinner, I can still do some of that. It's giving me some non-manifold edge errors apparently. Oh, it's doing weird stuff. My Maya is buggy at home for some reason. I think it's something to do with my computer. So I often get error messages for stupid reasons. Okay. So that's my battery done. Very nice. And again, like I was saying, it's still, you know, changeable. You know, if I feel it needs to be too high, or I feel if it is too high or too short, I can still, you know, grab sections. So if I feel that, for instance, I've made this whole section too wide, like that, thinking, oh no, it's too wide. All I gotta do is angle my camera so I'm basically looking at just the side there. I can just drag my mouse over just this section and then use my scale tool to scale it in. Same for these down here. If I want them wider or closer together, I just have to make sure I'm just grabbing this section and use my scale tool. Super simple. So do a save. So what have we got left to do? We've just got the center at the back. This thing to do at the back. Super simple. So I'm going to do a save, like I've just done. Now for this, I've got some weird information here where I've been like scaled it, moved it, rotated stuff. I'm just going to, for my own sense of ease, I'm just going to reset that back to default. So again, click the little snowflake, sets it back to default. Um, and what I'm going to do is, again, look at my reference, and I'm just going to make the frame that's going around the base of it, basically the bit that attaches to the monitor. I'm going to make that first, because that's got the most weirdest of this piece. It's got the most weirdest stuff in it to kind of think about. Okay, so again, just using the multi-cut tool, I'm going to hold Control, pardon me, and I'm just going to drag it down near the bottom, and kind of look at how thick this material is, like that. And then just grab those faces. Oh, make sure I only have what I need to work with selected. So if you end up having other stuff selected, make sure you deselect it, deselect everything, and then just make sure you're only in face mode on the object that you need to work on. So I'm going to grab these faces at the end. I'm going to extrude, but in this case, this is one of the points where I'm going to not use the tools it gives me. I'm just going to go to my normal scale tool, and then scale out using the blue square, not the blue axis like this, because what I want to do is ignore that blue axis. So I'm going to use the blue square, which basically ignores the z-axis. I'm going to bring it out a little bit, so then it kind of mimics this shape. And again, I'm going to pay attention to how thick this material is here. How far do I need to extrude that out? I cannot stress as well how much of this is all down to observation. Okay, so now I've done that, super nice. So what I want to do now is just go around, and I've used a 20-sided cylinder here. So I've got a particular kind of method to decide what edges I'm going to pick to extrude next. And quite simply, if I go from the very top 4 faces in the middle, like this, I'm going to ignore these. So I'm going to grab the 2 either side, like this. So these top 4 faces I'm going to ignore, grab 2, miss 2. So in fact, I'm going to isolate this off to do this. It'll be much easier to do. So miss the top 4 there, grab the 2 next to it, miss 2, and then grab these 2. Because then that'll give me 4 at the bottom. So again, I'm keeping it nice and symmetrical. And then what I'm going to do is extrude again. And I'm going to use the thickness just to bring it out slightly. And again, I'm really paying attention to how far out these come. I'm not bringing these out massively like into the stratosphere. I'm going to bring them out a little bit. That. And then I'm going to use, in this case, I'm going to use this little red cube to scale these in just at the edge. So I've still got stuff selected. I've not deselected anything. I'm going to use the red cube there to scale those in. But remember that these go a little bit funky. These go kind of wobbly because of the geometry we're dealing with. This does go a little bit funky. So I'll bring that in. And again, I'm mimicking this shape. Okay. You can see there it's all kind of wonky, which is fine. So I'm going to take away the faces at the back because we don't need those. They are not needed here. And I'm just going to de-isolate everything else for now because I want to really point something out. We snapped this cylinder to the back of this this plane at the beginning, so it's flush up against the surface. And then when we extruded out this first ring of edges, we did it so that there is no depth being applied to it. Therefore, this vertex here is perfectly snapped up against the surface here. But you can see that some of these edges are kind of getting a bit wonky, and we can see behind it. So what I'm going to do is go to edge mode, double click the face, the edges at the back, like that. But I'm going to D and V my pivot point to one of the vertexes which is against the back of the monitor. Because then when I scale, everything just gets snapped, like dragged and snapped in line with it. So that all those edges now get pulled against the surface because I'm using this vertex which is already against the surface as an anchor, like that. And the next bit to then, sort the rest of it out is dead simple. Just go to face mode. Just grab all the faces at the top. Like that. And then just use that scale to centum trick we did before. Boom, done. That's all we need to do. That's all we need to do. Beautiful. Now, I will hold my hands up and say that obviously theirs is far more symmetrical. So if you want to remake this tube before you go through this whole process, you want to remake this tube, this cylinder, so that it's maybe 18 or maybe 24 something, just so every one of these corner pieces is kind of like exactly in the corners like this. Go for it. I don't really care. I'm just going to show you how. I'm just showing you how you can do it using this. Cool. So, what have we got left to do? Okay, so we've got ignoring this end piece here. What have we got going on? Okay, so we've got where it gets kind of like it gradually kind of jumps down these kind of steps. Okay, so how do we do that? Very, very simple. What I'm going to do is first of all is delete this end cap. Do not want that. Boom. And I'm going to go around and do this piece by piece. So let me add a edge in. So I'm going to add this first edge here to where this kind of information is. Like that. I'm going to select all these faces now. I'm going to extrude and then I'm going to push it in. So I'm going to push the thickness in a little bit. Now what's going to happen here is I'm going to get these faces appearing at the end. That's because I'm extruding inwards, and how, if you remember how extrude works, these faces will get created at the end. We're going to delete these in a second. It's all good. But all I'm going to do first is just bring this first kind of rings in using extrude. Again, just to get that little bit of a lip there. And then I'm going to do the same thing at the very end. So again, using the multi-cut tool, find out where the end is going to be. Select these faces at the end here. Extrude. Use your thickness. And then I can delete these rings at the end just using face mode. Just like that. Mega. So now I've got the last. Okay, after this I've got the dials at the side that I'm going to do, but I'm going to do those using stuff we've already done before. But doing this little section now, very easy. So remember in class I said that I'm not going to make this out of the tube geometry, this cylinder geometry, because there's a lot more frequency and detail in this object, whereas the tube is very, very simple. So I'm going to keep that tube simple and make this as a separate object, but I am going to make it as a 20-sided cylinder. So I'm going to make another 20-sided cylinder, and then I'm going to move it into place. And this just might take a little bit of time to just make sure it's the right scale, the right position, the right size, all that kind of jazz. Oops. So again, I'm using a lot of that V-snap to vertex kind of jazz. Using the scale tool a bit there, as you can see. You can see it kind of, in my eyes, this kind of comes in slightly. It's not a purely 90-degree angle change. It does appear to come in slightly. Like that. So nice. And this is a very, very simple one at first. So I'm just going to grab all the faces at the front. I'm going to extrude them in. Again, I'm looking at the thickness here, and then I'm going to extrude them back. Now, I'm not going to push them all the way back because I can kind of trick the texture in this. If I'm having this go into just perfect black, I can make that back plate here be perfectly black and then blend in the shadow on the outside so it looks like there's a lot of shadow in there. It's all smoke and mirrors, remember. So cool, that's done. That's simple. Let me isolate this off for now. The back here I'm going to sort out a little bit because I'm going to grab... I don't need this whole back plate as it is for the time being. This is like a little bit overkill. There's too many faces here. Or, you know, this is too big. So what I'm going to do is just grab all these faces at the back. I'm just going to extrude it in and then I'm delete that. So then I've got this because this cylinder here is hiding the void like that. It's a cleaner geometry. It means that I'm not going to have awkward big discs and my UV. Like that. Perfect. So, making these little knobbly bits, how do I do that? Quite simple. What I'm going to do is just go from the top and decide either this one or this one. And I'm just going to grab this top face, grab this front face, and then basically go around in every other one. Make sure that I'm taking my time with my clicking so I'm not over selecting anything. Just do a quick look around to see. Check I'm not over selecting or under selecting anything. Cool. And then I'm just going to do an extrude. Add a bit of thickness. Like that. That's all I got to do for that. Boom. That's all it is. Now I'm not going to delete these edges, by the way. These vertical edges, or these are like diagonal edges, leave them in. Notice how I've deleted very few edges so far. I've not really deleted any edges. Cool. Now with this, all I've got to do is kind of clean up the geometry a little bit. So I know I want to bevel, not clean up, sorry, kind of make the geometry look a bit nicer. I know I want to bevel around here because again, looking at this, I've got that highlight running around, which is giving me the indication of a bevel. So again, let me just solve that bevel. I'm going to keep it as just a single segment. I'll not do too much. Now, if we look carefully as well, we can see that these aren't perfectly right angles like I've got them at the minute. They do slope inwards a little bit. Now, I might be thinking, oh, do I need to do a bunch of beveling for that? Do we need to do... No, you don't need to do any of that. The simplest way of doing this is just selecting the inside of the face here, in this ring, and then just using the blue square again, not because I don't want to have the y-axis, oh sorry, the z-axis move. Just grabbing the blue square and slightly nudging it in. And then I can flavor the taste. Now, if you did want to have an extra little bit of a lip on the inside, what you could do is take away the inside face for now, grab these faces and extrude those in ever so slightly, again, just enough. This will have you needing to go inside and delete some faces around there, like that. Because as I did that extrusion then, I was making these faces on the inside. So if I've done that, I'm going to go in, delete those faces. Let me just bring those in to give a little more of a... Maybe I can do a bit of a bevel as well. Yeah. And then for this back plate here, for the back of the inside there, just extrude, merge center. I can probably move back a little bit. Boom. Dead simple. Look at that. Look at that. Nice. Now, I'm not going to bevel much else in there. I'm not going to bevel much else because the area here is too small and too tight to have a bunch of bevels. Bevels are really good on large objects. If you get really small and tight areas like this, bevels just will not kind of serve you well. It'll make it too much of a headache. It's just not needed. Now, these blades on the inside, super easy to make. I am not going to build them out of this geometry. They're going to be a separate piece of geometry. What can I build them out of? Let's build them out of a cube. Because that's a simple shape, simplest shape, some might say. So I'm just going to bring it into the middle there. And now I'm looking at this design here, and I'm seeing the shape not necessarily just being a perfect block like that. I'm seeing them actually like this. It's almost like a wing of a plane. So I'm going to make one like that. Take off the faces. Take off faces I don't need, which is the back face and these two side faces. I don't need them. So that's all I'm going to be left behind with. Like that. And what I'm going to do is just scale it out a little bit. Bring it up to the top. Maybe add a bit of thickness with the scale tool. Okay. Shift D, move it down. Shift D, Shift D. So again, I'm just using that Shift D thing because I'm looking at that. I'm seeing there's an equal distance between each one. Well, I can do that by using the Shift D trick. But then if I feel like, ooh, that's not quite right, I can just go back and just do some adjusting. Shift D, move, Shift D, Shift D. That's not quite right again. I can be very, very free with that. Because all I've got to look at there is make sure that, these pieces aren't sticking out the side here. Because if I see them sticking out the side, if I've got something which looks like that, for instance, all I've got to do is grab it and just scale it in a little bit so that I'm hiding those edges. That's all I've got to do. And that's the nozzle done. And again, super simple, incredibly simple. So I'm going to just grab all this together. And just merge that. No, sorry, just combine, not merge. Do not merge, just combine. Look at how much more information, look at how much visual information that gives us. Tons of visual information. And all we've really added there is a little bit of an extrusion to the end of the pipe. A couple of notches here to kind of give the sense of the pipe kind of as these stages. And then obviously, this is a little bit more geometric, but again, it's not that simple. It's not that basic. Now, obviously, I'm going to bevel these. Oh, do I want to bevel them? I could bevel them more. I'm actually going to leave these alone. You could bevel these edges if you wanted to. Super, super nice. So let's do a save. So we're an hour and 20, hour and 10 in there. So we've done a lot in an hour and 10. Again, if you feel this is going a bit fast, pause the video or literally go to the little settings and slow the video down. It's all cool. Just make sure you're assimilating the information. Tons and tons done already. Okay, what do we need to do? What else do we need to do? The carabiner, I'm going to say, is an extra thing if you want to. I'm not going to penalize anyone for not having the carabiner in there. That's an extra thing. But what I do need in is obviously the dials. And what else? I think that's pretty much it. Oh, and the vents here. So I'm going to use a boolean to make these later on. But for now, I'm just going to make these because I'm going to use these. I'm going to make these using a boolean. But first of all, what I'm going to do is make one dial and then get my boolean kind of working and then boolean and then kind of fix up that and all that kind of jazz. So so how am I going to make these little dials on the side? So I was saying in class that these are actually a lot more simple than they might appear. Oops, there's something that's dropped off my keyboard. Like the thing that just jumped off my head of my keyboard. Cool. So these little dials here. So we're going to make one and then reuse it, repurpose it for the other one. So I'm going to go for the actual dial first and then make the pad second because it's going to be much easier for me. It's essentially the opposite of what I did for this here. But if you look at this, the more kind of geometric detail is on the inside, and then the smoother detail is on the outside. So I'm doing the same concept. I'm starting with a basic form, but in this case, the basic form is on the inside. So, how many edges? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, it's a six-sided little dial. I'm going to make a six-sided cylinder. So make a six-sided cylinder. Like that. Awesome. Okay. So first of all, what I'm going to do is, again, make the inside. So we've already done this as well, so I'm going to make the inside a bit rounder. So let me grab the top. Like that. And I'm going to extrude it in. Smooth. Circularize. And then merge this to center in the middle. Oops, a daisy. Make sure I'm only grabbing the things I want to grab. There we go. Merge center there. And then I can push this down, all this face in the middle. I can push this down. So far, so much we've already done. And I'm going to come back in and do the fiction of the end guns in a second. Now, here's the bit that I really like about this, is we've got these little bits going around the outside of this dial, almost like little grips, little triangles. I see these little pyramids. So what I'm going to do is use a bit of beveling trickery to do this. So I'm going to grab all these top edges here, running around. I'm going to do a bevel. Not a very big one though. I'm going to Bring it down, so maybe about 2.5. Maybe a bit bigger than that. Maybe 0.3. Like that. And then I'm going to take each one of these center faces I've just made. And then I'm going to extrude it. And just use the thickness just to pull them out slightly. Not that much, just a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is there's a lot of and then. And then what I'm going to do is just go around and then just grab each one of the top vertexes, merge the center, bottom vertexes, merge the center. Because I'm seeing these as like little pyramids, little spikes on the outside. That's what I'm doing. So I'm basically just making these little pyramids. So some of you have already like attempted this, and you pretty much got this bang on. Maybe added a bit too much information, too many bevels or too many edges. I'm keeping this really simple because relative to the rest of the model, these are all very simple and very small. So again, I'm just going around and just using the merge center here to make these little pyramids. But again, if you think that these pyramids are a bit too small, that's fine. If I just grab that center edge on each of them, oops, like that, then I can use, in this case, I don't want to have the y-axis come in, so I just want to use that green square and maybe just push them out slightly, like that. Perfect. Obviously, we've got end guns in the middle, but we're going to solve that in a sec. But I'm going to make the rest of, I'm going to make the actual base pad of this while I'm here. So underneath, I can get rid of all of this. This is all absolutely useless. Don't need any of it at all. I don't want to see it. It makes me disgusted. So that's just a good indication of just being careful with your selections. Don't rush it too much. There you go. Now all these edges going around the outside, we now have a lot more. So we have 1, 2, 3 times 6. So 3 times 6, or 6 times 3. Like 18 edges. There we go. I think it's 18 anyway. Bad maths. So all I'm going to do is select all this bottom group of faces there. Hit extrude. And then just use the normal scale tool. So I'm not going to use any of the tools that come up. I'm just going to go straight back into pressing R. Scale out. And then circularize again. Boom. Now obviously you might have this where it all seems to kind of like go wonky. Remember we have this, where you go? Oops, it is, I forgot which one it is. Not radial offset, not normal offset, not twist. Twist, there we go. So you got this twist that you can keep rotating around until you feel it is good. So I'm moving the camera looking at it from the top here. And I'm not being too precious, to be honest. I'm just kind of eyeball it in. But I'm also going to look at my numbers here, my twist. And if it's close enough, if it looks pretty damn close there, and it's very, very close to saying minus 14, I'll just put minus 14 in. Because that's probably going to be the right axis, the right angle for it. There you go. So with that now I can extrude down, bevel this edge, add a segment, maybe make that fraction a bit smaller. There we go. So a lot simpler. Like I said in class, it's a lot simpler this way. Sorry for the smack the microphone then. So I'll do that whole thing again from there, just to show you it again. So I've made this shape here. Again, we're going to deal with these end guns at the top in a second. The very bottom, I'm going to bring this out. I'm going to select all the bottom edges, making sure that I've got nothing down here. Extrude. I'm going to scale. It gives me this shape, which I'm like, okay, that's not obviously the right shape. I'm going to circularize. It completely ruins the flow because now we're all twisted. But then if I in the circularize tool set, if I just start rotating twist, I can find the right direction to go. And then when I eventually find it getting, if I look from the top, I can see how, the horizontal lines kind of passing through. I'm getting an even surface at the top and the bottom, and it's close to minus 14, so let's minus 14. Okay, that's cool. And then I can obviously, boop, scoot down, do my beveling, add a segment, just one segment. There we go. Awesome. Now it's time to do the inside, fix up this n-gon kind of situation in here. So, dead simple. First of all, we're going to fix up these triangles that were made from when we beveled out these kind of corner pieces here. Dead simple. It's all just target weld. Target weld in like that. Just like that. And now the fix here is just to, with the multi-cut, I'm just going to go from corner to middle to corner. 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 Last one, corner to middle to corner. There you go. So some of you were saying that when you look at this, you do see a slight kind of curve there. If you did want to add another edge in here and slightly curve it, that's fine. But I really want to stress is, when you step back away from something, what do you see? A straight line or a curve? I really see a straight line in this. And the last thing I might do is just do a bevel around the whole top section here, going all the way around. Nowhere else, just going all the way around this top section. Maybe like that. Perfect. And again, there's stuff like, harden edge, soften edge that we can still do. And, if you find that, actually, these pyramid sections are a bit too steep, you can always go in there, select the edges, and use that scale to just bring them in a bit. But for me, that's perfect. Awesome. So what I'm going to do is bring it over into place. So snap it into a vertex, which is, make sure my pivot point's at the bottom, actually. There we go. Find a nice vertex, which is in the right position. So in the middle there. Rotate around. Move it down into place. Again, looking at my scale, looking at the size of this, looking at the distance between the edges. Is this too big? Is this too small? Is there anything on this I could align it to? Not particularly. And I'm just going to duplicate and move it down like that. So I've got these two in there. Now, here's the really fun part. I want to bevel these because I'm thinking that these are actually attached to the monitor. That these are just like really stuck out of the monitor, and when you construct this, you have two holes in the frame that you push the monitor through, and that's kind of what secures it to the frame. So I want to have like physical holes in my geometry here. Now, if you don't want to do this, that's perfectly fine. But I would recommend you try this. But if you find, because it's just going to make your stuff look even better. And it's not that hard to do. You've just got to adhere to a couple of simple rules. I'm not going to try and boolean both of these into one solid face. I'm going to split it up into basically two surfaces, so that when I bevel it, boolean it, just like we did here, we have this edge going across here, which is basically separating the main body away from this boolean. I'm basically going to have another edge which is going across the middle here, like this, which is basically separating these two booleans away from each other, which means I can solve all the booleans on one edge up here, and then on this edge down here. So, easiest thing to do is just isolate what I need, like that. First of all, because what I want to do is, again, I just did it. Using the multi-cut, I'm going to bring an edge in, and then just flatten it out, and just try and get these kind of in between. And like from here, I can again just try make sure I'm getting these the right kind of position away aside from each other, so like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make another piece of geometry which is 18 edges around. So how many edges is this going around? 1, 2, 3. Well, it's 18 going around. So I'm going to make a cylinder which is 18 edges going around. And then just position it. So if I move these away, actually. So move these away, there you go. I'm just going to make sure that this is pretty much in the center of this object. which it is. And then I'm going to make sure that it's the right, it's just bigger. It's slightly bigger than the actual kind of the pad at the back. So ever so slightly bigger like that. Just a little bit, fraction. And then I'm going to pull this one. Again, bring it through just like we did with the booleans at the top. So it comes all the way through. And then I'm going to just duplicate this. And then just V, move it down, move a mouse to the middle of my dial there. So that now should be in the right position. Combine these two, I'm going to save actually. There you go. So combine these two together. And then just like we did with the boolean for this, I'm going to grab my frame. And then I'm going to grab my boolean pieces. Mesh, boolean, difference AB. Boom. Does that look okay? That looks fine. I'm not doing anything. I'm not control Z or anything at this point. I'm just moving my camera around to check. There's a couple of things I can see that I've got a weird little boolean edge right here that I'm going to have to deal with in a bit. But other than that, this is looking... There's another one there as well. This is looking pretty sick. Cool. So if I'm happy with that, I'm happy with the placement of everything. Edit, delete all by type, history. The boolean kind of stage is now done, and I'm left with my holes. So now what I have to do is do some fixing. So this should be pretty simple. Now, what I'm going to do is fix this a little bit differently because I've got geometry below and above each other that are equal to the same amount of edges going round. So I can make some simpler fixes here, so I'm doing less triangles. But then I'll still need to do some triangles in the corners here and at the bottom. Okay. So look how I'm doing this after I've done my beveling as well. So I'm not doing this pre-beveling. I'm doing this after I've done my beveling in my frame. Okay, so where my problem edge is, this is a problem edge right here. And this one down here is also a problem edge for the same reason. So in fact, if I isolate this on its own, there you go. Now why is that a problem edge? Right, so we've got an edge coming in from the right hand side that is crossing a halfway line. If you like, this edge right here is basically the halfway line. Anything to the left of this should be going up into this corner. But what we've got here is an edge that comes all the way across to the other side, like there, which is no bueno. And we also have it up here, which is no bueno. So I've got my way of fixing this. All the rest are fine. This one's perfectly fine. What's happening around the back? These are perfectly fine. They're going into the right areas. They're going into the right areas. Perfect. It's just these two at the front. So how I solve these is just with a multi-cut tool. I'm going to just put an edge. It doesn't matter where. I'm just going to put an edge like that. And again, Maya's doing its freak out. And then I'm just going to target weld that edge I've just placed in to the middle where it should be. Oop, I've got something else selected there. I shouldn't have anything else selected. There we go. So target weld this into there. So it's basically making this edge here going across come from there. So there, that fixes that issue. And I've got the same... I just clicked and think I did something. No, I didn't. I did the same one there, but you've got to get close to see this one. So this one gets very, very close. So what I'm going to do, same thing, just add an edge in. Target weld. Make sure I've not got anything selected. Like that. And obviously, bang, there we go. So, fixing some of this stuff up the easy way. So I've got the top of this and the bottom of this. So the bottom of the top boolean and the top of the bottom boolean, I can bring edges directly from one to the other. So I'm there going across to there. Boom, that's done. Do the same on the back. So what I do in the front, I do at the back. Boom, like that. And I can go through and do that for the next couple. It's going to make up some weird geometry, but I'm going to fix that up in a second. So I do that. That's cool. So I can go to the other side. And what I'm doing here is I'm adding structure to the mesh. So I've got that center line in there, and I can go off the one either side of it. And that's just adding that nice strong structure. Now obviously I've got some triangles appearing or some weird faces like this. Just a bit of target welding. That's all it is. Target weld, this to there, 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 this to there. Beautiful. Now I might even delete some edges that are from the original Boolean. So this edge right here, which is making this triangle right here, well, I like this shape here because it's a nice big quad. But currently this is stopping that quad from happening. So I'm going to bring that edge in like that. But then I'm going to delete this. So now I got that big quad that mimics this side. So this edge right here, nice and big. This is my problem edge because this is coming too far. It's like it's originating from the basically the wrong point that I want. So I'm just going to build an edge from here down to the corner, like that. Perfect. Now I can even do the same here, where I can bring an edge from the very bottom of this, from my original booleans, and bring it all the way down there. And then in this case, I'm going to bring this. I'm going to not bother trying to make edges go all the way up to this bit here. I'm going to leave it as it is. Just make a shape like this. Bring these edges here in. Like that. Bring this one here in. This one here in. Not this one. Oof. I'm going to bring this down here. No, I'm going to bring this up here. Like that, yeah, I'm going to bring this up there like that. I'm looking at how smeared that edge seems to be. That looks, from coming from this corner here down to there, this looks really kind of like smeared and pulled, this triangle. But if I go from here to here, it's a lot neater. It's a lot more of an even triangle, so, oops, it is. Boom, like that. Perfect. Lovely. So basically I have to copy that on the other side. So, yeah. So what have I got? I've got two edges there. Like that. So I'm basically going to mirror what I've done here. Except at the very, very bottom, because I'm not going to send this edge going further, because I've not got to send it. I've not got anything to send it into. At the very bottom, I will just send this into the corners like that. Like that. Beautiful. Let's go back and do the same thing on the other side. It's a lot of repetition, a lot of the same stuff over and over again, but it's all good. Because as soon as you solved it on one area, you basically just copy what you've done on the other one. So what do we get? We got 4 edges here, so let's copy what we've done there. And then we have a quad, and then we have into the corner there. Oh, we can do the same thing here. On this one, we can delete that edge there, because we've already built those edges in. That. Let's see what happened on the other side. Yes, we got 2 there, and then we got 5 there. Nice. Nice. And the last thing to do is just bevel these. Kind of find the right ratio for you. I think 0.1 is quite nice. So I can put them in. Where's my thing? I can put these back in. Now what I am going to do is just pull these out a little bit. Not extrude them, just pull them back a little bit. Right, so just get rid of one of them. There you go. Now geometrically that makes more sense to me than these just being flush against the surface. I can, I can kind of see the hole there. So I'm going to be really pedantic as well on this one. I'm going to bring these flush with my actual monitor from the inside. Like that. Now why am I doing that? That's because I've got a slight gap in between my monitor and my frame. And I love the idea of being able to just see through and almost see the dial kind of enter the monitor. I think that's sick. Again, it's that real world element that just makes me very happy. Yeah. So we've done that before. It's just a Boolean in thing. That's all we've really done there. It's just Boolean. But uh, the big thing with that one is because we were doing both at the same time on the same, effectively the same piece of geometry. I just put that edge in the middle so that I could have basically the top bit and the bottom bit be separate faces that are being booleaned, so that it's much easier to fix the in-between faces rather than trying to deal with all that horrible information. It was like you got two booleans in the same face, and there's lots of weird geometry being made, and it takes ages to fix. Because I've done it before, and it's not nice. And I've always wanted to keep my booleans nice and clean. So the last things I'd have to do, obviously the if I want to do the carabiner, I've got the carabiner, and I've got stuff like screw heads. So I said in class before that um, on something like this, your screw heads are going to be pretty similar, if not the exact same screw head throughout. So this screw head is probably going to be exactly the same to the screw heads that are on the monitor here, on the little switch thing here. I could imagine. So you can make one screw head and then duplicate it off to make your other ones. And there's a couple of things left to do. Okay, yeah. So the back of the radiator here, back of the battery. So I'm going to create this through a simple extrusion at first to make this general kind of depression here. And then I'm going to use Boolean to Boolean out these shapes here, but then do a bit of cleanup, because that will need a bit of cleanup. Then I might end up deleting half this model again, and then kind of cleaning up one side and then duplicating over, so I'm doing half the work. Okay. So, what I'm going to do is grab this face here. I'm going to extrude it in slightly. And then I'm going to make a face. So this face I've got selected, I'm basically going to make this general area here. So this bottom bit here is where just above where the little stamp is there. And this top edge here, I'm just going to bring that down. Like that, it's looking okay. So again, I'm looking at the distance between the top of this to this little like area here. And then what I'm going to do is grab that face I've just had selected then, and I'm going to extrude it in, and then again scale that in ever so slightly. So I'm going to scale it in like this. Not that much, just enough, just a little bit. Just like that. That's all I'm going to do. All I'm going to do. Because what I'm mimicking there is this little indentation you've got going on there. But then I'm going to use a simple Boolean to basically make the incision there. But the actual shape I'm bringing out, I'm going to be a bit careful with, because, or I'm going to kind of really pay attention to what I'm bringing out, because what I've got here is obviously it's something long, But then in the corners there, you can see that it's pretty straight. So what I'm seeing here is a cube, a simple cube. Okay. And I might do this a number of times to get the right shape in there before I then go in there and fix everything up. But what I'm going to do is, again, get a cube, make a cube. I'm going to snap it to the middle, like this. There you go. Now, how many have I got going down? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, that number 5. So, now one thing I'm doing here is I'm being really pedantic about stuff, and having done this a number of times. The very top and the very bottom geometry, I'm going to just move my pivot point to the top and snap it in line with this bit, as you can see, all the way up to that bit. So it's flush against this top edge, like that. So if I duplicate this, take it down to the bottom, do the same thing, just move my pivot point to the bottom, and then snap it so it's flush against this edge. And then I've just got 1, 2, 3 in the middle, okay? So I'm just doing a bit of scale there just to get a bit of height there. So I'm just going to eyeball these in. I'm not going to waste a load of time doing this. Just eyeball in the general distance like that, which is nice. Combine all these together. So I'm doing these as one big like uniform group so that everything is pretty much the same kind of shape. So then I'm going to bring this edge all the way up again, flush to the very edge there. And I'm going to bring all these and bring those flush up to the very edge. Now this is a really good chance to get used to that V-snap stuff. Notice that I'm not grabbing the middle and moving, because this is going to happen because all 3 axes are getting used. So it's snapping all over this place. I'm just moving it sideways. So I'm holding V, moving, but then I'm moving my mouse to the vertex I want to align it to. Right. And the last thing I'm going to do, very, very last thing I'm going to do is, and I'm going to do this for a kind of particular reason. I'm not going to do the very top and the very bottom edge, but I'm going to grab every edge like this. So the top and the bottom, I'm just grabbing the internal edges, and then each one of these, like this. Because again, I'm looking here and I'm seeing that I'm not necessarily getting that shape in the corners, but I'm definitely getting a bit of a slight bevel shape here. So the bevel. Something like that. And it'll all become clear why in a sec. So something like that. Cool. So this is a complex Boolean. I won't kind of sugarcoat it. This is a relatively complex Boolean, and I'm doing this in a certain way, having done this a good few times. But what I'm looking at here is I'm almost looking like as a jigsaw. I'm missing pieces here. So in my mind's eye, I'm thinking, well, what is the shape of that missing piece? And all I've done here is made that missing piece. But I've also looked at where the Boolean comes up to, and it pretty much comes up to the edges here, which is what I've done there. I've brought these edges all the way flush to this, and that's just again just very simple. It's just using the vertex, holding V, and then just moving the mouse to where I want to align it to. Right, so I'm going to save because this might go arse over apex. So I want to be able to have a save for this. So I'm going to grab my affected and I grab my effectors and I go to mesh, Boolean differences AB. Let's have a check round, see how that looks. That looks pretty sick. So now you can see why I made that particular shape with the Booleans and why I was bringing it all the way up to the edge. Nice. Look at that. Nice. Cool. So I'm happy with that. Now, if you're not happy with that, Control Z back. Oh, sorry, just get rid of the Boolean altogether. Control Z back. And then start again. But I'm happy with that, so I'm going to just edit mesh, delete all by type history. Boom. So then I'm committed to this Boolean now. But here's where the fun starts because I need to do a lot of fixing. So first of all, I'm going to draw an edge through the middle of all this because I've got no edges in the middle here. and that's going to be a bit of a pain to solve later on. So just bring that through. Again, don't worry about this, because eventually I think it'll probably like it might write itself as I'm going through doing this. Just this version's super prone to greening. Like that. So all I've done there is just remade those center lines going down the middle. Delete half of it. Let's reapply that material. Okay, so here's where you have to do some really sensible, thought out end gun fixing. So where are my end guns? My end gun, I've got a massive one here, because this is where all these booleans have gone up to. So I've got loads of different edges there. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's like 12 edges going around this one little face right here. But then if I look close here, I've also got a an end gun in each one of these little faces here. Because I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got 6-sided face here. Now I'm gonna be a little bit cheaty in this. I'm gonna do a bit of a target welding, and I'm actually going to close this little gap here. I'm going to close it. So target weld, I'm just going to close it back into that, like that. Boom, boom, boom. And you might see sometimes your mesh goes a bit funky, but that's just because it's unsure what you're doing at first. Like that. So yeah, I'm just target welding them, so I'm just getting a simpler shape. I'm taking away some of that complexity. Because again, it's a relatively simple, small area that. So nice and simple. Cool. So I can't see any more of those hanging around, which is good. Now, what I'm going to do is also take away all these back plates that are back here. I'm going to take those away while I'm here. So I need to kind of move inside to do this. Two, two, two. Go. So, leave that one alone. Yeah, leave that one alone. Get rid of. No, leave that one alone. Actually, no, I'm going to leave them there for now. I've still got end guns inside here in specific areas, but I can fix those up using like Quadra or multicut. Not Quadra, I keep calling it Quadra or multicut. Just try and do that as well. Is that gonna? That's probably the best way of doing it, actually. Just get rid of that. And underneath. Like that. Like that. That. Cool. Oh, I got a little rogue little dude there that I can just target weld in. So I'm also looking for these little floating vertexes from the Boolean process that might be hanging around. So I had one just on the edge there, but all the rest look okay to me. That looks fine. I was expecting it to be that kind of weird and crunchy. That's cool. Right then. Fixing these end guns. So I'm going to need to bring some edges wrapping around. But what I'm not going to do is have an edge each one of these. I'm going to So I'm not going to, like each one of these vertexes, I'm not going to have an edge going round each one of these vertexes. Which I'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'll have like 10 edges going round. I'm not going to have that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to triangulate these in together pretty quickly. So you'll see like these two, for instance, here are going to turn into a triangle here. So that's my center point there. Oop, there you go. So I'm going to start from that point there, and I'm going to build. So again, this is where Boolean kind of gets a bit complicated, and this is why I'm kind of reluctant on people just Booleaning whenever, because there's so much fixing needs to happen, and some of the fixing's weird. So what I'm doing there is I'm just using the multi-cut. I'm selecting one of these little surfaces here. I'm just putting a vertex on where I basically want things to go into there, so I know that, right, that's my destination point. And then I'm just going to build an edge from like there into the triangle like there. And obviously, this isn't in the right position, but I need to have these on an edge to then target weld them in. Because then I can just target weld them in there, target weld them in there. Now they're connected. It's impossible for them to connect without doing that because how the Boolean has set up the curves here and set up the edges, it makes it near impossible. So for me, it just makes it really easy if we just put a point in the middle and then build a triangle into that on the outside and then target weld those back in. Build a point there. And then just bring it in. Then back. So those three are good. So what I can do now is using our lovely multi-cut, I can just bring an edge in, align it like that, and then just complete that edge. You can see there, because with the multi-cut, it only goes up to what is a quad. As soon as it comes up against an end-gon, it stops that edge going any further. So, there for instance, I can go like that. And then I'm just going to grab this, align it like that, and then just complete that trip to there. Boom. That's good. Same thing there. And one last one. There. So that's those three middle ones done. Let's just have a look at actually what's happened. So right here we've got this edge, which has given us two vertices next to it at the top and bottom. So obviously that's part of the big end-gon going across here. So what I've done is just opposite to that, I've made a vertex, made a triangular kind of destination to make that triangle. Use the target weld to bring those edges back in, so they're actually connected at this point. Because I can't, it's the surface just isn't set up to be nice and usable. I've got to set up this shape ahead of time and then kind of target weld stuff in together. So I've done that for each one of those. Oh, my mind's been a bit funny. There we go. So there I've got these triangles going all the way around. And the last one's in here. So I've got these little, this is still an end gun right here because it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 edges going around because of this edge. So what do? One thing I could do is, again, just using quad draw, multi-cut, I can just bring it into a corner like that. And I can do the same thing at the bottom. So here, that's why this is a bit of a problem, because I know I want to come from this edge, but because of the Boolean, this whole edge is acting like its own complete edge. So right there, I've got to build an edge and then target weld it into place. Like that. So that's a bit nicer now. No more end guns, a few triangles, but nothing too egregious. Now, I'm not going to bevel any of this. I'm actually going to keep, because of the complexity of this area, and as you got all these different edges heading into this, and it can get a bit kind of confusing, I'm not going to bevel any of it. I've done all my beveling. I've done all my booleaning. I'm going to leave it like this for ease. Because again, we can get away with a lot from texturing. And now at this point, it's just about bringing that over to the side, reverse, combine, merge. There we go. And why I made one half and not both half at the same time is just because I'm doing so much work on one half. I don't want to go over to the other half and do the same amount of work. I might as well just do everything on one side. And if I'm not mistaken, that's everything. Again, the carabiner not done, but you know, I'm okay with that. I'm not going to do a carabiner on mine, at least in this video. Right there, so we're 2 hours down essentially, and we've got everything done. What we've done here is just get those basic kind of shapes in there that we saw to do in class. But again, these are really basic pieces of geometry. They're just cylinders with a few extrusions and a couple of bevels. Same for this one. It's just it was made a little bit different because you got this cylinder, this cube, which is extruded down. But again, its base form is just basic cylinders. But they're not. None of these are 20-sided. These two are 12. This one's 16. And then we made the coil. So this we remade the coil in this video, but there's also a video dedicated to the coil anyway. So that's all cool. We made the nozzle at the back, including sorting out the weirdness that can happen when you make these kind of wing sections for the screws. So do a save. This section here, the kind of the nozzle. Again, because that's a separate bit of geometry right there, including the veins on the inside. Whatever you call them, the wings. I don't know what you call them. These are all separate. For, again, keeping it really easy, keeping it simple. You know, keep it simple. And then a little bit more complex work. We made the dials on the side, and then in my case, I booleaned out the holes so that I could connect them to the actual monitor itself. And have a little bit more fidelity for me. And then we made the battery, just like we did in class. And then I booleaned out this section here, which is this is the most complex part of the model. This right here is the most complex functions because you're beveling out multiple different pieces, but you're not making a hole all the way through. You're basically just cutting out a section. But then you've got to fix all the end guns on the side, which needs a bit of kind of solution, kind of thinking about. So you make these triangles and then send the triangles all the way around. So these go all the way around. So you do that for 3 of them, and then for the top and the bottom one, you basically just got to find an edge to put that edge into, like that. So we multi-cut from one corner to another. Now, a lot of this geometry might seem a little bit kind of gross. Notice how I've not deleted any edges. I've not cut away any edges or anything like that. I've kept it all fairly simple. Rarely have I actually deleted edges, I think. I've very rarely deleted edges, unless I'm like, this needs to be deleted. A lot of what we've been left behind here is like intended, you know, for structurally it needs to be there. It's what makes the mesh kind of strong and kind of hold together. If I just start deleting edges because it doesn't look nice or whatever, you start to jeopardize the structure, the skeleton of the object, and it starts to kind of fall apart. You'll see bits where where there should be a hole, you might have a polygon kind of like blurring and smearing over the front of it because there's no scaffold in there, there's no skeleton. So get used to looking at these edges because for me this is beautiful. I love this. This is a work of art for me. Like, not to toot my own horn, but you know, this is a really nice piece of geometry. There's some really nice solutions being done. There's some nice consideration between beveling in different ratios and beveling in different fractions and different kind of segments. The shapes are simple. I'm communicating the right kind of information. Where it needs to be simple, it's simple. Where it needs to be complex, it's complex. And I'm separating those complex and simple parts out in sensible ways by not trying to keep everything as one solid mesh and breaking it up where it needs to be. Oh, and the only last thing, and I'm not going to do this in the video, but the last thing to do is just these things. I keep forgetting about these bolts, but these bolts are literally we've made this shape 4 times so far, 3 times. It's a 6-sided shape. We've made the 6-sided shape there and there and there. So all that is a 6-sided shape with just a smoother circle on the inside. We know how to do this. We've done it 100 times already. So I'm actually going to leave that video there, and then in the morning I'm going to make the UVing video, because this whole thing is not difficult to UV. There's some bits which might look very difficult. You might be looking at the coil and thinking, how are we ever going to unwrap that? It's actually really simple. But obviously, I'm not expecting anyone to know how to unwrap this. But it is simple, trust me. The most complex bit to unwrap is going to be this. the frame, because it's all straight and stuff. It's all very even, but there's just a lot of different kind of faces and edges and kind of directions to it. But most of this is actually really easy to unfold. It's all based around either a planar projection, a cylindrical projection, or an automatic projection, depending on the complexity and how much control I want over it. But yeah, so I'm going to leave the video there and then do the UVing one the next one. And I want us to attack this and the UVing. And the next class I'm going to keep is like a UVing class. Um, and kind of do just kind of run the class like that. But that's it. There's nothing else that needs doing. You might see versions of this where people have actually put handles on top, almost like little carry handles at the top, which I think would be cool. But it's not in our reference. So if it's not in our reference, we're not going to do it because we can only do geometrically what we can see. Obviously, texture-wise, we have a lot of freedom there. Okay, awesome. I think this looks really cool. For me, when you first make this and you're just getting the basic tube at the back and the basic, handle and the basic screen and stuff, it does look very bare. But then as soon as you start putting stuff in like the switch and these little blocks and then these like dials on the side, the coil, you start putting in these dials, the holes, adding a bit more information to this, the whole thing fills out a lot more. You start to fill up these broad areas with information. And it looks sick. And like I said in class, I've always said it's just all about practice. What we do in class is not our final piece. We make our final piece through practice and study in our own time. So cool. There we go.